Okay, so we all know what's in the news these days, especially from the US, but it's perturbing the rest of the world. Stock markets are crashing across the world, and it's all related to a global reset of the trade that one of the countries wants to accomplish. But this is an article that came out a couple of weeks ago, few weeks ago, that talks about how China came to dominate the world in renewable energy. China now eclipses every other country in the world, including the United States, in the green technologies of the future. And here is how it achieved this lead. That can be put in the context of this tariff business, and we don't know where we are going to end up with this experiment, but nonetheless, China doesn't seem to be backing off. As of today, I'm recording this on April 8th, 2025, and China says they are not going to back down on the tariffs. But if China has lots of critical minerals, has all the resources to keep producing and selling things to the rest of the world while also ensuring its energy security with renewables and so on, then maybe the experiment is not going to hurt China as much as one would expect. So here is a prop showing the globe, and there is China, and renewables, solar, electric vehicle market, and of course heating, cooling, and charging stations. Obviously, Europe and US are trying hard to protect their own EV markets, for example, because the Chinese EVs will flood the markets if they are allowed to come in, which means we are all in this business of climate change mitigation. EVs would be good for mitigation, but that doesn't mean everybody is going to allow Chinese EVs to come in to save the world, right? So we have to maintain our economies, grow them, and also do somehow climate change mitigation. Things always get complicated. Coming back to China, China's takeover of nearly every technology needed for the green energy revolution happened gradually and then all at once. China now eclipses every other country when it comes to installation of wind and solar power, a striking transformation from 15 years ago. It was fueled by a gold rush of entrepreneurship and unwavering government support, including through hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies. So this unwavering government support is what is not happening in, let's say, the US. And this is actually an article from the Washington Post that I'm reading because it's a good article. They have done good research. They show some data. So obviously, we can take the material from anywhere, not just peer-reviewed journal papers, right? So in the race to master technologies of the future, green energy is one arena where many analysts agree that China has pulled ahead of the United States in almost every key area, from electric vehicles to solar panels. That gap is likely to widen under President Donald Trump, analysts say, as Trump focuses on boosting fossil fuel production, drill baby drill, and cutting funding for clean energy projects. China is further increasing investments in renewable energy technologies. So you can see in 10 years how this gap, if it widens, is going to have many other cascading effects. It is difficult to overstate China's singular lead across clean energy technologies. The gaps are both enormous and historically unprecedented, says Milo McBride, fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a think tank. Recent politics in the United States, Europe, and India support green industries. Recent policies in the United States, Europe, and India to support green industries have created a handful of competitors, he said, but the fundamental dynamic has not changed. To abate China's lead across everything is going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to be difficult, McBride said. How China, the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitter by far, manages this newfound influence over the energies of tomorrow will have far-reaching ramifications for global politics, trade, and the fight against climate change. So it's doing a lot of things for its own energy security and dominating the economy, global trade, etc. But seems to be a well thought out plan with funding and policies behind them. We can always debate about China's governance system and liberties, freedom of speech, etc. But we are not going to go there. With a climate skeptic president in the White House, Beijing sees an opportunity to cement its commanding lead and fulfill one of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's key goals to surpass the United States and European nations in advanced technologies. So it's a long-term strategy. China rules the world in every aspect of clean energy. China's rollout of renewable energy is happening far faster compared with any other country, and it's accelerating. So here are some figures in gigawatts of total installed capacity. Renewables in China surge past the United States and the EU. Annual installations of wind and solar energy in gigawatts of power, going up to 600 gigawatt here. China is up here, and EU is way down here, and US is even lower. Wind power, again, China is here over 400 gigawatts, EU is just about 200, and US is less at about maybe 180 gigawatts or so. Okay, take solar, the world's fastest growing clean power source. When China overtook the European Union in 2017 to become the world's leader in solar energy, it had 130 gigawatts of panels installed in total. The United States reached that amount in 2023, 6-7 years later, when China added 200 gigawatts. Similarly, with wind power, China was only marginally ahead of the EU until 2019. By 2023, Chinese wind farms were able to generate 450 gigawatts of power, double that of EU. If operating at full capacity, those turbines could match the total generating capacity of all energy sources in India, not just renewables, everything: coal, fossil fuel, solar, and wind. So this is a super exponential growth in some ways. You can see that here. Sales of EVs in China leave the EU and United States in the dust. This is sales of electric vehicles in millions. China reached 8 million. You can see the rapid acceleration here from 2020 to 2023, and this is EU and US way down here. So these figures include plug-in hybrids, hydrogen fuel cell, and battery-powered passenger vehicles. Another abrupt leap has been in electric vehicles that we just looked at. In 2020, just over 1 million battery-powered and hybrid cars were sold in China, making up about 5% of the car sales in the country. Last year, 40% of all cars sold in China, the world's largest auto market, were electric. Green technology manufacturing is concentrated in China. Chinese share of global installed production capacity, 2023 and 2021, you can see the jumps: battery cells, electric cars, solar modules, and wind turbines. Okay, that's a fairly significant growth in a short period. Okay, share of global installed capacity, it's almost 90%, 85% here by 2023 in battery cells, 65% in EVs, solar modules over 80%, wind turbines well over 60%. In most green technologies and components, China makes up more than half of the global production output, and that share grew from 2021 to 2023. Okay, China controls raw materials needed for the green revolution as well. China dominated the supply chain for raw materials needed for the green revolution. It's by far the largest producer of most processed critical minerals such as cobalt, nickel, graphite, essential for making batteries and solar panels. While China's deposits of these minerals are sizable, it also gained the upper hand by investing heavily in the hazardous process of chemically refining these materials. So they are planning and executing at incredibly rapid rates. Starting in the 1990s, while developing countries were tightening their environmental rules, Beijing gradually took over this toxic production process to secure what is considered a strategic resource with little regard to pollution or workers' health. Well, this is always the case, that China can ignore lots of things, including pollution, but pollution became a big issue, and now China has steadily improved its air quality because of the fallout from international partners and international businesses in Beijing and so on. So China dominates the processing of critical minerals used in green tech. Global share of minerals processed in each country: China, Chile, Indonesia, and rest of the world. These are basically those that rise above 10% in total. So you can see here China, Chile adds a little bit, Indonesia adds quite a bit in copper, lithium again, nickel, and cobalt. Almost 80% is China. Graphite, almost 95% is China. And this is actually rest of the world, not Indonesia. Indonesia is here in nickel. Rare earth, China is again almost 96% or so. So with this kind of resource base and their willingness to ignore pollution and invest in growing the green technologies, they are obviously getting ahead. Where will it end up? We don't know yet, but for now they dominate. Now it's the global kingpin. Last year China refined 3/4 of the world's cobalt and 91% of its graphite. It also produced 92% of all processed rare earth elements, the hard to extract metals used widely in high-tech manufacturing. This has given Chinese manufacturers cheap and ready access to critical components, and Beijing a political tool. So Beijing got a political tool to get the companies going and provide them cheap and ready access to critical components. Chinese officials have increasingly threatened to weaponize their control of supply chains in diplomatic standoffs and have banned exports to the United States of gallium, germanium, antimony, and super hard materials such as synthetic diamonds, important components of electronics, fiber optics, and semiconductors. So the tariff business obviously is going to make some of these things even more complicated. The industry has flourished thanks to government support in the 2010s. Beijing's attitude toward new energy, as it called it then, changed abruptly. It had been seen as a niche way to cut reliance on import of coal and oil. Everybody wants to be energy independent. Suddenly, it became a way to create globally competitive companies in a market where American and European rivals were only a few years ahead. Beijing identified 13 technologies of the future it considered of strategic importance, and the resulting policy was particularly successful in ensuring China's rapid progress in lithium-ion batteries, electric vehicles, and solar panels. Many Western analysts agree. Planners encouraged these industries with direct subsidies, tax incentives, and financial support through the state investment funds and cheap bank loans. There were plenty of hiccups along the way, though. Lavish subsidies created a gold rush, and hundreds of companies registered as new electric car brands, but many manufactured only cheap battery-powered buggies or inflated sails to get bigger handouts from the government. Beijing cut back on blanket subsidies, but has kept up the policy support to make it happen or continue the growth. This means developed countries face a daunting task in catching up with China's lead. Aside from having vastly different political systems, they are also latecomers to the market of clean technologies, which was valued at $700 billion globally in 2023. If climate action has to go ahead, then this will keep growing very rapidly as well. China spends far more on supporting its industries. Government's financial support for green technologies is shown here with direct subsidies, tax incentives, financial support, and China-specific factors. So you can see China is in the order of 250 billion. So China-specific factors include below-market land sales, state-owned enterprises net payables, debt equity swaps, and others. Financial support includes below-market credit and state investment funds, so all kinds of subsidies. US is less than 100 billion, maybe about 80 or 90. Japan is lower, but it's a smaller country. Germany, France, South Korea. So you can see this is massive compared to other countries. It's difficult to compare the level of support that Chinese companies, including electric car maker BYD, battery giant CATL, CATL, wind turbine maker Global Wind, and solar panel producer LONGi received compared with market leaders in the United States, not least because many forms of support in China are indirect, such as tax rebates. China's national champions see surge in declared subsidies. So government subsidies rushed to renewable energy leaders after 2020. BYD in EVs has gone to almost 3 billion batteries, almost 2.7 billion. LONGi solar panels peaked around 900 million and has dropped off since. Global wind has had up downs, but still it remains at around 210 millions. Okay, but the financial reports of companies show that Chinese government support has remained high since 2020 as installations and sales have accelerated even after some nationwide subsidies ended. The most competitive companies appear to be getting a larger cut of handouts. It's clear that Chinese government sees selected companies as able to lead the industry in the future, so they receive much more support, said Van Xin Liu, an analyst at Kiel Institute for the World Economy, a German think tank. And this is part of the problem. If China is subsidizing everything very heavily, and then they inundate the markets with their EVs, which are way below market rate, then the local industries, indigenous industries, and EU and US are going to come out very expensive compared to these subsidized products, and part of the tariff battle is also that. This goes on in agriculture, in aviation industry, and aircraft manufacturing, and so on and so forth. Clean tech is fueling the Chinese economy. In the meantime, the Chinese economy is slowing sharply, making renewable energy one of the few bright spots at a time when consumption, employment, and the property market remain in the doldrums. GreenTech made up more than 10% of China's growth last year, a record contribution according to the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, a Finland-based research group. China is also dealing with massive struggles in dropping fertility rates, and they are trying to pay women to have children and so on. This makes Beijing deeply invested in protecting its global dominance. The Green Revolution is delivering jobs and investment at a time when both are sorely needed to offset the slowdown in other sectors. Why is everyone in China so keen to develop these industries? Of course, it's good that they are sustainable, but the bigger reason is that people can make money, said Yang Lei, vice president of the Peking University Institute of Energy. It's not just policy makers, but now ordinary people who can feel that these industries are a huge new driver of economic growth. Okay, so China's economy relies on clean technology more than others. So you can see the investment in renewables and the sale of carbon replacing technology as a share of GDP, manufacturing clean energy technologies, deployment of clean energy capacity, and sales of electric vehicles and heat pumps. Again, China is, as a share of GDP, it's almost 5%. EU is down at less than 2%. US is around 1%, and India is even higher than the US in terms of the percentage share of GDP in manufacturing clean energy technologies, deployment of clean power capacity, and sales of electric vehicles and heat pumps. India obviously has a reason to invest as well, since it wants to be energy independent, just like China, and India doesn't have any heavy resources in oil and gas anyway. They keep burning coal, which is bad for everybody. Green tech contributed significantly more to the economy in China in 2023 than in the EU, the United States, or India, according to an IEA analysis. Underscoring its importance, China invested close to 680 billion in the clean energy manufacturing in 2024, according to IEA. That's almost as much as the United States and the EU combined. Combination of strong state support, a vast domestic market, and a huge network of suppliers has made it far cheaper to set up a factory in China than in the United States, Europe, or even India, according to the IEA. Okay, this is the cost advantage of China in batteries, solar panels, onshore wind turbines, and offshore wind turbines. So you can think of this as capital costs estimated relative to each technology's ability to produce a certain amount of power on an annual basis. Costs less than 1K in China when you combine batteries, solar panels, offshore and onshore wind turbines. India is higher, over 1K. Europe is much higher, over 1.5K, and US is even higher at around 1.8K or 1.6K or so. Okay, Even when excluding hidden forms of support such as the low prices of land, cheap bank loans or tax credits, the low equipment and construction costs in China mean that the country gets more power per dollar invested in solar, wind or batteries. The biggest difference is in solar. Costs are under 200 per dollar, 200 per kilowatt in China, but nearly 450 in the United States. And a leg up on the future as well. China's advantage go beyond scale. Chinese scientists and engineers are now producing far more frequently cited research on clean technology than peers in the United States. This stands in contrast to other advanced industries such as semiconductors, in which US universities retain an edge on foundational research so far. The commonly held view that China only used subsidies, intellectual property theft, and low cost labor to achieve an advantage in clean energy seriously underestimates the technological capabilities of China today, said Anders Hof, a senior research fellow at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. China produces huge numbers of engineers with PhDs, and their research allows Chinese companies to make constant upgrades, setting them up to retain their competitive edge in the future. Looking again here, some more data. China produces far more highly cited research than other countries. So in electric battery, so you can see the states. China is in the red. Electric vehicles way above everybody else. PV modules way above everybody else. Even in electric battery they are above. So you can imagine that this is only going to accelerate. All this means China is winning the export game as well. China isn't keeping its renewable energy lead at home. Its top companies are rushing to sell abroad. Exports of solar panels, electric vehicles and lithium-ion batteries almost tripled from 2020 to 2023. Here is the China's green technology export boom. Quarterly overseas sales in solar panels, lithium-ion batteries, electric vehicles going from 2017 each quarter. We are here in 2024 quarter 2, over 30 billion. It dipped during probably COVID or so, but maybe other market perturbations. But nonetheless, you can see that it's a fairly large overseas sales that China is driving. The IEA has estimated that China's clean tech exports will be worth more than 340 billion by 2035, about the same as the oil export revenue of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates combined in 2024. Now you bring back the tariff battle going on now. Where will we be in 2035? Will it be China all the way, or will US somehow reorganize the global markets in a way that it comes back into being dominant in everything? Tariffs imposed by the United States, Europe and other advanced economies have slowed this surge slightly, but Chinese companies are quickly adapting by focusing on emerging markets in Africa, Southeast Asia and Latin America instead. In 2024, Chinese export of EVs, batteries and solar and wind products to the global south surged to account for a record 47%. I think that's 4.7% of the total. Okay, not 47. It's probably a good thing for the climate because these clean technologies are diffusing all over the world, says Kelly Sims Gallagher, a professor at the Fletcher School at Tufts University, who was senior advisor on the Chinese climate issues in the Obama administration, but is also probably resulting in the United States losing even more market share globally. Okay, so I read it a bit fast because the text is fairly simple and the podcast is already almost 25 minutes, but you get the idea. I'm putting this out at this point because the article is nice and there is a context to it with the Russia-Ukraine war still going on, Israel and Hamas still engaged in a battle, and there are other unstable spots, and US has started this tariff battle and climate change is riding on top, creating all kinds of havoc, and 23-24 were very warm. Maybe we are beginning to slow down, but it's unclear how this rest of 2025 will turn out in terms of climate extremes. We still don't know what Putin will do or what Hamas will do and Israel will do and so on and so forth, but one must keep in mind that we still have to continue with mitigation and other climate action, which is always difficult when you have so many things to worry about. Okay, so it's a good article. I'm going to leave it here.